you guys, this is Jerry Mateo with recordingsoftware.com. And remember to check out the link in the description below where you can get an awesome bundle deal on these 3 plugins that we're featuring today. Hey, you guys, welcome back. For today's video, we're going to be focusing on how you can use these really cool plugins from Mcdsp to do a lot of creative and just in general mixing stuff. So in the last couple of videos, we've been more repairing and fixing issues, where in this case, we're actually going to be mixing something that already sounds good. So I have the drums right here. I'm just going to bypass all the processing I've done to them. And let's just listen to this. This is a cover of a Bob Dylan song that we recorded years ago using a Neve Custom 75 console. I think it's a 42-channel console with retro and modern circuitry. Basically, you just click a button and you can even hear the relays clicking and switching between the lines. And it basically uses vintage circuitry or modern circuitry. Anyway, that's not important. Let's take a look. So it sounds pretty good, as you can hear from there. And I'm really digging the sound that I got with the actual recording. So what we're going to also do is I'm going to activate this active EQ. And we're going to turn all of these on. And we're going to see what it sounds like with all the processing on. And then we'll bypass it. So here we go. And off. So you'll notice that we have an increase in clarity and field of depth in this. And we're actually not doing a lot of processing. A lot of that is because these tracks were recorded very well. Now let's just solo up the overheads so we can start off with them, bypass all the processing, and let's get started. First thing I like to use when I'm doing creative stuff or stuff with hi-hats especially is I like to use a dynamic EQ. Dynamic EQs are really cool. They're basically like EQ bands with compressors inside of them. And the active EQ has high and low pass filters. It has 6 static EQ bands, basically normal EQ bands, and 6 active EQ bands. And you can control those by the threshold or this little arrow right here. You can even invert the way they work. So it can either boost the signal up when the threshold goes above or push it down. You have the ratio, attack, release. You have internal, external keying, and you can even solo out the bands. But a really cool thing is you also have a ton of EQ shapes, which is really, really crazy. Let me grab this first one and just boost it up and let me show you. You have stuff like different Q values where you can get super crazy steep. You have really interesting shelves. Really, really nice and tweakable high pass and low pass filters. It basically has full control. And because you have 12 total bands, you really are able to do almost anything. And what I like to do with overheads is I like to take away some of that nastiness from the cymbals. And in turn, I will use another active EQ band to boost up where the hi-hat is. So let me show you. If I turn this on, you can see that I have this nice Baxendale, making it really dull. And then I have this 6th band doing a little bit of boosting just where the hi-hat is. And we bypass it. It's a really simple and easy trick to do because it's going to add the perception of a lot more detail while also preventing any harshness. Now, next, we're going to be using the 6050 Ultimate Channel Strip. This is basically one of those lunchbox style plugins where it has a bunch of modules that you can select from. You have 12 EQs, I believe. You have 10 compressors and you have 3 gates and 3 saturators. And all you do is you just go on the module, you click on it, and you can just select between whatever ones you want. You have everything from 1176 styles to 33609s to LA2As to some that they even invented and created, and even some Fairchild style ones. Now, I personally am a big fan of the DBX style compressor, especially for overheads because it's really mushy. And let's see what we're actually doing here if we take this out of bypass. Hear how I'm adding a lot more clarity and detail. I'm cutting some low end with the high pass filter and just doing mostly boosts and a little bit of compression. We bypass it. We bypass all the processing. And turn it back on. And hear how the hi-hat stays a lot cleaner and a lot clearer. It doesn't have that weird phasing sound anymore. Now, next for the hi-hats, all we had to do was use the E404 band and just do a little bit of a high-pass filtering. This is basically a version of their filter bank EQ, which is one of my favorite EQs. Their distortion modules can actually be used to emphasize by using some crunchy compression. And for that, I would say maybe the type D100. but we're not going to be needing that today. Next, let's go to the kick. This is probably one of the most interesting ones because this one I'm using the E300 because the E300 is, I believe, a tube style and it sounds amazing on just boost. I'm also using the BC22 to do a little bit of over compressing. And then I'm going to bring back the detail by using the E404 because of its super clean sound. A really great thing with the Ultimate channel is we're also able to check the phase by having the polarity button. Let's see what the kick sounds like. You can hear the over compression that I'm using right here because 33609 style compressor is really grabby. If I bypass it, and with it on, I'm just making it a little clicky. So if we actually take this completely out and then we play the audio, you can still hear the kick, right? But watch when I turn it on, it really just pops out and punches through. Now, next we have the snare sum. For this, I didn't need the AE600. Actually, for a lot of these, I didn't need it. I tend to use the AE600 more for when I'm doing really creative work. And I actually focus on using the distortion, the Opto LA2A in limiter mode style compressor, and then the E404 to clean things up. Now, for this one, because it's snares and I'm a huge snare fan, we're going to actually set up a new module. We'll bypass all the processing and let's recreate a cool little sound. First, let's listen to the sound I've created. Right, bypass it. A lot more exciting with it on, right? And in the mix, it just adds a little excitement and it kind of helps it pop out of it. Now let's recreate this because I love messing around with snare sounds. We'll start maybe around here, highlight all these again, and let's just play this real quick. So the first thing I like to do is make it sound a little snappy by using a limiter. You can really hear how the transients popped out more. Without it. With it. Now, next, let's do a little bit of repair work because I know that the snare has a little bit of ring to it. So since this already used my old settings, let us reset everything to default. And let's just see if we can find that ringing frequency again. We'll use a really tight cue. Right around there. And the reason why I want to cut that is because when I activate my distortion module, it's going to really emphasize on what was once there. Watch. Bypass. To on. So now let's push this up. Add some body. And let's see the input and output. Bypass. On. Just adds a lot more body and attack to it. Let's see how it sounds like in the mix. Without it. With it. I really like the way it sounds. It has a nice transient attack. Now the toms, I haven't really done much to. I kind of like that really natural sound these toms had. So I didn't feel like they needed to be processed, and that will happen sometime. Now the talkback we're going to come back to in a different video because I like to make fake crushed drum room reverbs using talkback mics. This is just a SM57 next to the drummer, and if I bring it up, so we're going to actually come back in a different video, and we're going to turn this into a drum reverb room. But the next thing I like to do is go to my drum bus, bypass all my processing. All right, we'll put this over here. And let's see my levels that I start with. So we're reaching at our loudest peak around here without any processing. If we turn it on, so we're staying around the same volume, But what I like to do is shave off a little bit more peaks so I can gain some more headroom while getting a little bit louder drums because they sound like they punch through a lot more. What I do is I set a threshold. It's going to be to about here. We're going to set our ceiling to be just about there too. And we might even have the threshold go down a little bit. The really cool thing about this limiter is you have these multi-bands, which basically have different modes so the crossovers can be changed. It's basically like having a multi-band dynamic EQ compressor pushing into the limiter. So when you push a band, it pushes into the limiting wall, but you also have the ability to have a dynamic threshold for its individual dynamic band right here. So it's really interesting. So I'm going to go with a very transparent and clean limiting. And then we're going to go to multiband. We're going to snap. And watch what happens if I boost the frequency. Solo out the drums. So you can get really cool crushed drum room sounds like this. But what we want to do is we want to kind of shape our overall EQ curve for the drums. So let's focus on bringing out some of that beefiness of the kick, taking out some of that ringiness of the overheads and snare together, and get rid of some of that excess sibilance from the overheads. That sounds pretty good. Do a little bit more low end. That's some ringiness that we don't really want. Bypass it. With it on. It just kind of brings some focus in. It's very subtle, but that's because we're not trying to change the game here. We're just trying to make things sound as clean and transparent as possible. Now we're going to bypass all the processing we've done. We'll take this out of solo. Let's see how it sounds, then we'll bring it in. And we're going to turn it on right now. Off. On. Now, a really cool thing is we have different modes. So I'm going to stay with dynamic on the multiband mode, but as you can hear, everything stands out and it's around the same volume, but it just sounds so much cleaner and clearer. And now I can move on to mixing my guitars, my bass, my piano, especially because a piano takes up so much room. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. Keep in mind that this isn't just for drums. This is a dynamic and static EQ, a very, very flexible channel strip, and an amazing limiter that you can use on all your channels and buses. That'll be it for today's video. This is Jerry Mateo with recordingsoftware.com, and I will see you guys. Bye.